The battle for Bryansk has begun, but the Zavoin propagandists are in a real panic as the Ukrainian tanks are just now entering Gluparov. Is Trump abandoning Ukraine? The terms of the peace treaty will shock you. Well, the Kanderavites have been completely finished off. They definitely haven't faced such losses before. And also a crucial comment from Roman SWITAN and Rostislav MURZAGULOV about what's happening. All of this is coming up next in our segment, Hotspot. There is a real massacre in Russia. The Ukrainian Armed Forces continue their powerful assault in Kursk. Z propagandists are in a panic, shouting about columns of Ukrainian equipment that could break through to Bryansk at any moment. What is happening right now on the territory of the Russian Federation? Watch the report.
Bryansk is defending itself. According to the governor of Bryansk region, Alexander Bogomaz, the situation in the area is quite calm, although it can be tense at times. Troops are getting tense in the Bryansk border area. According to the same Bogomaz, people see how the Bryansk group is growing stronger. However, in practice, this has not been verified yet. And here's how the praised air defense works. Everyone saw it last night. According to reports from propaganda media, today there was the most massive drone attack on Bryansk region since the beginning of 2025. Over the territory of the region, air defense systems intercepted and destroyed 37 drones of the defense forces. It is reported that 83 drones were supposedly shot down over all of Russia. However, in all this situation, one thing is unclear. Even though the air defense is shooting down drones, they still keep coming. There was a loud explosion today in Lipetsk. Local residents heard about 12 explosions in the industrial part of the city. Telegram channels claim that Ukrainian drones attempted to attack the Novolipetsk metallurgical plant, the largest steel-making enterprise in Russia, which produces about 20% of all Russian steel.
Naturally, such a strike cannot determine the outcome of the war and cannot significantly affect the capabilities of the Russian army. But systematically, if we keep doing this, we need to take it into account. Logistics are already being disrupted. When a certain processing plant is on fire, it was already included in the Russian plans. Any factory from it having entered military units, products from flammable lubricants were supposed to flow. If it's already on fire, then it's not going anywhere. They need to rewrite, let's say, the orders, look for where to source it now, from which other factory to supply. This complicates their work.
It's complicating things for the Russians. They understand this and are even starting to howl publicly about a possible offensive by the Ukrainian Armed Forces in the Bryansk and Belgorod regions.
If we analyze Trump's words and his position, cowboy approach, then we can say that the world should be in a position of strength. And then, well, if in a position of strength, then we lead our troops and heritage yet several regions of the Russian Federation. Then we will talk from a position of strength. This could also be a greeting to their foreign minister Lavrov, who says, and by the way, to many in today's administration of the United States, let's start from what is on the ground, meaning we should base our actions on reality. So, where the troops are located, let there be a temporary dividing line there. It's clear that these territories are legally ours and will never belong to the Russian Federation. We do not recognize that. But for now, let's keep an eye on the reality. As Lavrov says, what is on the ground? Well, if you think so, let's go ahead. We will move our troops into 3 to 4 more Russian regions, and then how will we proceed from what situation is on the ground?
Well, for now, the Russians are horrified, thinking about how to protect Russian territories while the Ukrainian defense forces are advancing further into Kursk. Ukrainian Armed Forces paratroopers, along with other units, successfully launched an offensive in one of the directions in the Kursk region. As a result, the military reports that new positions have been secured and the tactical situation has significantly improved. Successful attacks and maneuverability are helping Ukrainian defenders achieve success even in the most challenging areas for them. On the front section in Pokrovsk, as a result of successful assault actions, Ukrainian forces liberated a large part of Peshanovo, which holds significant strategic importance for defense. Pokrovsk,
a small town, and about the significant advance of the enemy, the spirit of the city, and the possibility of encirclement. We've been hearing this for 6 months, but I don't remember anything either. It raises questions about how this happened. Wait, I think that these are Russian war correspondents it would be unlikely that 2 years would have been able to assess the Russians' actions in terms of access successfully. They've been standing near one city for 6 months, unable to do anything.
Less than a week ago, Ukrainian troops also drove Russian troops out of the village of Kotlina, located 10 kilometers from Pokrovsk. The operation involved armored vehicles, tanks and drones, which allowed for effectively dislodging the enemy from their fortifications and ensuring the advance of the infantry. According to military reports, the Russians deployed 3 brigades to hold Kotlin, but it didn't help them.
Here's what the well-known military expert ROMAN SWITAN says about the offensive on Bryansk.
One of our strategic tasks after reaching the borders of 1991, create a security zone on Russian territory about 30 kilometers deep. This is roughly the zone that has now been established in Kursk. It's localized around Sudza, but the depth is about that. Naturally, to accomplish this strategic task, we shouldn't rule out the possibility of entering the Bryansk region. Moreover, this can be done, for example, not through the border, by breaking through the Russian positions, but rather through more or less established redoubts along the border. Come in from the flanks. The movement of our troops is currently towards Belgorod. Here it is. For several days now, there have been offensive operations to the southeast of Sudza along the railway. Exactly, Sudza, Belgorod. So it's right in that direction. That's the kind of movement, but it's optimal. We basically have nothing left to do. In Kurshkina, that is in the Sudza area, there you just need to blow up the pipe, destroy any gas pumping mechanisms to Europe so that the Russians don't get any money, and we can move either northwest towards the Bryansk region, but optimally, of course, southeast towards Belgorod, because we need to address a couple of issues that are present in Kharkiv. So first of all, create a buffer zone around Kharkiv towards Belgorod and cut off the Russian incursions around Lepsy and Volkansk. So this can be done with such a raid, and basically this security zone that our troops are currently creating is a demilitarized zone, so to speak. We are destroying all military facilities, and denazification, the Russians are destroying civilian infrastructure with bombs. No one will live there anymore. You couldn't come up with anything better. No one in the world will accuse us of engaging in denazification. The Russians are doing this themselves. Well, everyone welcomes demilitarization.
Is Trump outselling Ukraine? The negotiations between the US and Russia shocked the whole world. America has exploded with new statements. Russian propaganda, of course, paints a picture. They say Trump is already flying to Moscow and then Putin will go to Washington. But what lies behind the loud betrayal of the US president? Watch the story.
Is Trump selling Ukraine? Yesterday, there was a phone conversation between Trump and Putin that lasted an hour and a half. Such a conversation shocked the US and Europe. Some politicians accused the US president of betraying Ukraine's interests.
President Trump called our enemy Russia before calling our ally Ukraine. Let's not talk about what that means. The betrayal of Ukraine's interests and our own, even before the negotiations began. Trump makes deals perfectly, especially for the Kremlin.
But NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte sees this conversation differently. He believes that this creates the impression of the beginning of peace negotiations regarding Ukraine. And when a journalist asked Rutte if he sees this as the beginning of a betrayal of Ukraine, he pointed out that we shouldn't forget that the US president spoke with Zelensky after his call with Putin.
This should undoubtedly indeed be seen as a very clear, significant, and impactful anti-systemic action on Trump's part. But overall, his team is now focused on forming a position. And I think that for the other vectors, absolutely everything will indeed go exactly as planned.
Meanwhile, Europe is demanding Trump's involvement in the peace negotiations. It is noted that the common goals should be to ensure support for Ukraine and to adhere to the principle of nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. Without Ukraine and nothing about Europe without Europe.
Even if Trump and Putin came to an agreement on something hypothetical, then, in fact, it is about implementation without Ukraine, at least. But, in fact, I think that Ukraine and Europe, because our security goals absolutely coincide and are synchronized, it will simply be impossible to implement.
Trump stated that he plans to communicate with Putin frequently over the phone. And after the first meeting, which will take place in Saudi Arabia, another one may follow. The day before, Trump also stated that he hopes for his visit to Moscow and for Putin's reciprocal visit to Washington.
This should not be taken as flirting or friendliness or some kind of pass from Putin, or even more so, any betrayal regarding Ukraine and Europe. No. We need to understand, first of all, the context of this conversation. The context of this conversation is that Trump and Putin are talking through translators. So it's very difficult for them to establish any personal contact, which is why they talk a lot. They talk a lot using some diplomatic, if you will, cliches.
Meanwhile, after the conversation between Trump and Putin, the Russian stock market began to rise rapidly, and the dollar exchange rate in Russia has already reached 90 rubles. What could this mean?
The stock market, one way or another, reacts to trends. It does not directly affect the stock market. The influence, let's say, even of the President of the United States, essentially, when there will be pressure on the Russian Federation for peace, that will affect the stock values of the Russian Federation. They can drop very sharply and crash. At the same time, the stock component of both Ukraine and, by the way, Europe will increase proportionally.
After the conversation with Putin, Trump called Zelensky, with whom he spoke for almost an hour.
A long conversation. We discussed a lot of nuances. Diplomatic, military, economic. And President Trump informed me about what Putin told him.
So is there betrayal on the part of the United States, as many believe? Here's the main question.
I was convinced that there was no betrayal, and I stand by that. With the head of the Pentagon, who has already commented on certain criticism, the call between Trump and Putin.
Anyway, Trump stated that he will continue to help Ukraine, otherwise Putin will think he has won. Trump's special representative, Kurt Volker, also plans to visit Ukraine from February 13th to 22.
Is Trump betraying Ukraine, or is Putin deceiving us instead? It's a complex topic, but political technologist Rostislav MURZAGULOV helped us figure it out. More details in the video.
Well, let's see. Let's try, if we really want to analyze everything, how it actually was, let's try to set the emotions aside. I am also absolutely pro-Ukrainian. You know that I've been there 100 times, spent many weeks in the frontline areas, and so on. And I really want to also Trump, along with his defense ministers, the Secretary of State, and everyone else, flew to Moscow with a special forces team, put Putin on board, and took him away in handcuffs to The Hague. I really want that. I really want to live and see the moment when this happens. But you see, politics is the art of the possible. And I don't rule out the possibility that Trump has similar thoughts about Putin. I'll explain why, despite his outward friendliness. But he is operating under the assumption of what he can do. Or maybe he can do what he did now. And all his sweet words towards Putin, of course, stirred up a storm in my chest yesterday as well. And I was thinking, how could this be? This is a person who has put hundreds of thousands of people in their graves. And I was saying, how could this be? This is a person who has put hundreds of thousands of people in their graves. Innocent people on completely far-fetched grounds starting this war. But now that the emotions have subsided, I'm ready. I want to ask all my friends and viewers, including you, to hold on to these emotions for the fact that you know there will be a lot in life that will be politically useful. So let me explain in order. Trump is facing a situation of global confrontation, not with Putin, but with China. In this sense, Putin is definitely not a friend to him. This is a person who is helping China today in this global confrontation. This is a person who is providing China with almost free oil and gas. And for Trump, this is like a thorn in his side, because this is happening today. Clash of the systems. It's a clash of systems. If, to put it bluntly, the Chinese side wins, then Bolivar won't be able to carry two. Then China will develop like America, and America will develop like China. With all the consequences, with poverty, with the population basically being left behind. In a significant number, for the most part on the sidelines of life, social development, and everything else. To prevent this from happening, he needs to cloud Putin's not so bright mind today. With these oily, simple words, with these words, I feel like a technician, sort of in a way as if, in a sense, perhaps in a manner of speaking, And I understand how it was when he turned around. It's just that, Volodya, our grandfathers fought. They really studied the issue and realized that this Papuan needs to be given some beads to dance on his hind legs in front of Trump, shaking his spear and giving Trump everything he needs. Because in reality, friendship between Trump and Putin is impossible. Because Putin belongs to the system that Trump is fighting against as the leader of a country that is the main and leading figure in the opposing system, because it's impossible for the situation to suddenly change and for them to swap roles. For some reason, Trump will unite with Putin and go to war against Europe. That won't happen. This is the silly rhetoric of Trump's aides towards Europe about how you guys are doing something wrong. You're not quite right. That doesn't mean they will go to war with Europe. This means they want to merge with Europe in maximum ecstasy. And what they want with Europe is for everything to be in unison. And so, when I hear that Putin has outplayed everyone again, I think, oh my God, guys, why are you playing along? With this fool, he has never outplayed anyone in his life. He didn't even win the war on his own territory against a small republic, the Chechen Republic, if you forgot that name. So he lost there too. He got played there as well.
Fighters from North Korea are being sent to the front lines again. Russia's losses at the front are so huge that even wounded soldiers from Kim's army are being sent there. But there's practically no one left to bring back into action. In the last assault, the Koreans were completely defeated. Look!
The US and South Korean troops have started large-scale exercises with live fire near the borders with North Korea.
1, 2, 3. Stop! Come on, let's go. 2, 3, I'm talking.
Let's go, up! The 3-week exercises began on February 3rd at a military complex in the city of Puchon, approximately 30 kilometers south of Ie, the demilitarized zone that separates the two Koreas. About 2,000 troops and more than 150 units of military equipment are participating in the exercises, including combat vehicles, strikers, howitzers, attack helicopters, and more. The goal of the exercises is to strengthen the joint operational capabilities of the Allies and to assist the rotational unit. The American troops Stryker is adapting to the conditions on the Korean Peninsula after their arrival in South Korea last October. Previously, these exercises were conducted separately for US units, and South Korean troops only joined them in July of last year.
Not long ago, North Korea officially abandoned its policy of future reunification of the Korean Peninsula, declared South Korea a hostile state, and so on and so forth. So, in reality, they probably can't just not react. They need to react. South Korea is an important partner of the United States, so they are moving towards a show of force on their part. But it's important to understand that a show of force is needed not as something temporary, but as a fundamental systemic solution to the problem. And as long as the alliance between Russia and North Korea continues to grow, I don't think that in any way a show of force will help stop all of this.
In a comment to the Central Telegraph Agency of Korea, Kim Jong-un criticized the trilateral military cooperation between the United States, Japan, and South Korea. According to the North Korean leader, this supposedly increases tension and leads to a military imbalance in the region. Kim Jong-un promised to take countermeasures, including further development of the country's nuclear forces.
Well, basically, it's the same tactic that, the Russians use, for example. So before taking any aggressive actions, you accuse your opponent of aggressive actions yourself. So this is a pretty straightforward and simple scheme. What could be behind this scheme? Well, again, the question, it's complicated. I don't think Kim Jong-un is planning to start a war against South Korea or Japan right now. But it's clear that he's laying the groundwork to expand his claims in the future, relying on the corresponding nuclear capabilities that he obviously plans to strengthen with the help of Russia.
Russia is helping North Korea to bypass sanctions and strengthen it. And the nuclear potential? In a recent statement, Kim Jong-un said that North Korea will continue to support Putin and that support will be unwavering.
Thanks to cooperation with Russia, North Korea's military potential has significantly strengthened recently. Moreover, it has strengthened in many areas as evidenced by information from numerous publications in American and European media. Thanks to cooperation with Russia, the quality of North Korea's ballistic missiles has significantly improved. So this is reflected in both range and accuracy. And that's further and further. North Korean missiles fly into the Sea of Japan. The North Korean army is gaining almost combat experience in the war against Ukraine. And accordingly, this is also a very important factor.
As part of military cooperation with Russia, North Korea plans to establish the production of drones, which could enhance Russian attacks on the battlefield. At the same time, it's likely that North Korea will produce simple but effective kamikaze drones.
And thus, this will also be a significant enhancement of North Korea's military potential and ultimately Russia, one of the elements of the payment for military assistance from North Korea. This is military assistance, very extensive. According to South Korean intelligence, only long-range artillery. The North Koreans have transferred 200 units to Russia. There's nothing to say about shells and manpower. It's a well-known fact. Well, now they will also be producing drones. Moreover, once again, fresh reports from the global media. Allegedly, Russian soldiers are on the territory of North Korea, where they are supposedly recovering from injuries and undergoing rehabilitation. Although many, again, analysts and military experts in the West tend to view all of this as an exchange of experience, and how the Russians are already directly training North Korean soldiers in North Korea. In order for them to... They were more prepared for the conditions of modern warfare.
This allows the Kremlin to pass on modern combat experience to Pyongyang, especially considering North Korea's needs to improve its tactical skills.
The North Korean group in Russia could be destroyed in just 3 months. Analysts from the Institute for the Study of War came to this conclusion. According to their calculations, Kim's army is losing 92 people every day. At this rate, the entire batch of troops brought in from Pyongyang could be wiped out by mid-April.
We see 12,000 North Korean troops.
We see 12,000 North Korean soldiers who have come to Ukraine to fight against us. 4,000 have been killed. They have suffered heavy losses. By the way, in just the Kursk direction, all the intelligence agencies in the world would say that Russia has lost 35,000. Imagine being willing to sacrifice the lives of 30,000 of your people just to pressure us there without achieving any results.
The data from South Korean intelligence is a bit more modest, but it also counts North Korean losses in the thousands. According to official Seoul, at the beginning of this year, 300 North Koreans were killed and over 2,700 were injured, which prevents them from continuing to fight. If the rate of mercenary destruction doesn't decrease, the entire group has no more than 12 weeks left to live.
Now, a third of the North Korean troops have been wiped out, and for the most part, they haven't played a significant role, because in general, there's weak interaction with the Russian units. It's a long process for North Koreans to adapt to new conditions, which, well, let's say among the language barrier and in connection with the specifics of what they were trained in back in their country.
At the same time, the Russians themselves have repeatedly mentioned the complicated relationships with their Korean comrades. The Russian command is simply plugging the gaps with North Koreans in the most challenging areas in the Kursk region, forcing them to draw out Ukrainian drones and unconditionally storm the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces. At the same time, they haven't even properly trained their new allies on the specifics of combat operations.
Yeah, and what good are they at all? Well, they arrived, they were at our location, we were told when they got to the hospital. They aren't doing anything. I heard they were landing 300 people there. Right away, 200. Some are disassembling the disposable ones, and they explode. 200. Some of them are going crazy, raping, drinking. Well, like, you know, but I haven't seen them in battle even once.
Analysts believe that soon Putin might ask for another batch of Korean soldiers for his local assaults. However, Kim Jong-un is unlikely to repeat his mistake. The thing is, he sent some of his best units to Russia. After all, he really wanted to show results. But today, looking at how irrationally they are being used, Russia, Pyongyang will likely refuse to send new thousands of loyal soldiers to us their deaths.
Those same North Korean soldiers, they were put on, let's say, this conveyor of killing in the war against Ukraine. Subtitles made by Dima Torzak. Well, let's say in the regular composition, fully under command, led by officers and generals in the units which are managed within their own chain of command. And of course, there is one there. Connection with the North Korean dictator. I think he is well aware of the losses that the North Korean troops are currently suffering and about that. But how this will affect the decisions of the North Korean dictator, we may find out very soon.
Putin decided to give the North Koreans credit for such huge and senseless losses in his own way. It is already known that the DPRK troops have been invited to the victory parade on May 9th in Moscow and will march across Red Square. With just one small nuance, we still need to survive until May.
That's all for now. Well, for more fiery news from the front, stay tuned for the next episode.